So it's been a week now since last Epoch has dropped its new season, and I had a video a couple days ago about like pros and cons of the game, but as time is going on and I've done some reflecting, I've kind of realized a bigger issue for me rather than all the individual little things I listed in that video. I think there's a bigger overarching issue. So it's kind of like you go into something having expectations, a certain mindset about it. You're expecting a certain outcome. And then you go into it and it's not that, and it's jarring. It's like when you drink a glass of water and it's actually lemonade. So you like take a sip and you're like, because, well, lemonade's not gross, but you were expecting water. And it's just jarring, right? Like normally you wouldn't spit at lemonade, but when you thought it was water and you get sour acidity, it's like, ugh. So I'm gonna graph 3 parts of the game right now. They're all interlinked, but they're all a little bit different too. So on Aberoth patch, I'm going to go through here. Here's what I'm gonna do. Aberoth patch, the patch in which Aberoth came out, and this is Uber Aberoth, aka this patch. Not necessarily like the fights themselves. I'm not talking about the fight themselves. I'm talking about the overall state of the game. So, difficulty. A lot of people, before I start, a lot of people have been saying, oh, you're playing Paladin, that's why the game's so easy for you. Well, I just started a Falconer now, and yeah, I'm blowing through corruption no problem. I did not have gear saved up for my first character. I mean, I had like a little bit, but really nothing. Like I had 0 exalted items. I just had shards to make crappy rare items. So really not a huge boost, and the game's still really easy, okay? Like like this is an easy game, okay? And it's only gotten easier, and I don't think that's in itself a bad thing. It's more about what I'm saying, the expectations part. So the patch when Aberoth came out, difficulty, it started kind of hard. Now I'm gonna be honest, there was at one point in this game where acts 1 and 2 were actually like the hardest ARPG acts of all time, I swear to God. I think it was fixed for Aberoth, so I'm gonna go with it's fixed. Yeah, so it starts around here, still like a relatively low difficulty, and then as you get more loot in the campaign, it goes down. And then assuming you are a sane person, you will go to maps in Act 7 and skip the Lagan fight, because if you're fighting Lagan in campaign, you're already losing. So here is the difficulty would be really low by the end of the campaign when you're going into maps. And then when you get into maps, or rather monoliths, it will be a slow burn in difficulty up over time. Slow linear burn, just because of the way corruption works. That's what corruption is, right? It just goes up with, hey, get that off my screen. So yeah, it just goes up over time as corruption increases damage, HP on enemies. It's just a linear difficulty curve, right? And then this patch, it is more something like this. It starts very easy, and then you will get the slow burn in maps, but it's a like a much slower burn. Actually, that's a bad line. It's just a much slower linear curve, and then you hit Aberoth, and it's like boom, crazy. First Aberoth, not that crazy. Maybe it's like, I didn't include the spike, but maybe it's like that much of a spike or something. Uber Aberoth, way crazier, whole different story. I got to 500 corruption. Here would be 500 corruption. I was doing maps no problem on Paladin. It's gonna be different on other classes. anyways, but like like the curve will maybe be here, like maybe it would be like this instead. But point is, the disparity in difficulty here is insane. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but when the disparity in difficulty here was this before, it's like jarring, right? And then we have gearing. So Aberoth patch, gearing was something like this. You start with nothing, and then you kind of get like a little bit in campaign, not really. And then you hit maps. And then it's like, okay, it's still slowly going up, maybe at a little bit faster rate. And then you get your Circle of Fortune prophecies going, and then boom, you get a loot explosion. And then it kind of tapers down as you build up more of your favor, and then boom, you get a loot explosion, and boom, you get a loot explosion. And along these lines, like you hit your like 1 LP items, 2 LP items. Not an exact like curve here, but you get the point, right? You have these big spikes in gearing, and you get like these very obvious big dopamine moments. You hit the good affix on your LP item. You get the loot explosion every once in a while. You have to refarm gear if you don't get the right LP. When you hit it, it feels really good. So on gearing this patch, it goes like, all right, you got nothing. All right, boom, you got a loot lizard. And then you got like nothing, boom, you got 3 more loot lizards in your next map. Boom, 3 more loot lizards. Now, I don't want to hear that you got no loot lizards. You're just unlucky, okay? I think if you're not seeing regular loot lizards in your campaign, you're just really unlucky at this point. I could be wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong. And obviously, okay, it wouldn't actually be this high. It'd be more like boom, 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 or whatever. But you get the point. And then over time, you'll get into maps, and you'll keep kind of like getting these loot lizard drops and whatnot, maybe some exalted drops and stuff. And then you hit your favor and COF point, and then it becomes like boom, prophecies, and then it becomes like you get your LP items, but now all the your first LP is guaranteed, so that's like boom, and then you get the point. Like, you just get way higher gear, way faster. There's less defined dopamine moments as opposed to before. These are obviously not the scale, but it kind of gives you an idea of the timeline here. And then you kind of flatline. Once you got your 2 LP items, you kind of really flatline for a while, because getting 3 LP and higher is a much, much lower chance. Maybe you get 1 or 2 here, right? And for the record, like, the blue and the green graph have nothing to do with each other, okay? So don't look at where those are compared to each other. Then loot in the Aberoth patch, I guess that follows the same curve as gearing, so since all the loot is gear in this game, so never mind, don't even think about loot, but just the graphs themselves, right? Basically, long story short, difficulty curve drastically lower, and then it hits a really high point. Whereas before, it was just a smooth burn the whole way. Now it's like a very shallow difficulty curve compared to before. And then there's a massive spike. Then gearing, you'd have these defined dopamine points. Now they kind of get watered down since the beginning is so crazy. Basically, I feel like before you get your guaranteed 1 LP, you haven't even started gearing yet, because nothing feels really good before that point. Unless you get like really lucky and get like an early red ring or something. But overall, the baseline of gearing is much higher. And I feel like that's kind of a problem because the game sits in this limbo point where you hit LP2 and the step up to LP3 is not like the size of this. It is the size of this is very high tech, I know. And then LP3 would be like, boom, like here's LP3, right? Maybe even higher, honestly, depending on what uniques you're using. And then like LP4s are obviously not required for anything, but LP4 is then like all the way up here. So you kind of hit this point where your character is just like realistically the max power it will ever be very quickly. If you see what I'm saying. You hit LP2, boom, your character's like done, and LP2 is not really anything crazy considering LP1 is guaranteed. And then another problem, this is why I saved this for the end, but competition, like they want the game to be competitive, but they do things like open, well not open, but like closed testing in a way that practically every content creator can get the information if they wanted to. I feel like those things do not work well together. And it's just kind of this like clash of identities, similar to PoE 2, where I feel like it doesn't really know what it wants to be. And I think that's about it.